Hey everyone, in this video we're going to continue our build of my DIY photo booth. I'm following along with the instructions in the book that I put together, How to Build Your Own DIY Photo Booth, which will be linked in the description below. You can go to shutterpilot.com/DIY-photo-booth. You can download the book. You can see other videos that I've put together kind of explaining the process, and you'll also see a link to this entire playlist, which will also be linked directly in the description below. So in this video, I'm going to show some of the different components that I could have used, but ultimately decided to use one of several different options. And I'll explain why I use one over the other as we go along. So let's get to it. All right, so first up we have our choice of computing platform. And you can see I've got 4 different options here. I could have used a Surface, a phone, an iPad, and this is actually an iPad mini, and a Raspberry Pi. So I'm actually going to go with the Raspberry Pi for now. The reason is that the Raspberry Pi is a really good prototyping platform. There is another single board computer that I really want to use called the Dragon board. I've used it in the past, but I actually don't have any with me right now. So if this works out on the Raspberry Pi, which is actually a little bit easier to work with for prototyping, then for future builds I might try out the Dragon board. The reason I didn't go with one of these other options is because, well, first of all, these two are kind of small, the phone and the iPad mini. I don't actually have a full-sized iPad or an iPad Pro. Those would have made decent platforms as well. However, they're kind of expensive, and they have very specific rules that you have to follow if you're going to be building an iPad app. I have actually built an iPad app. You can go download that from the App Store. It's called Glider Plus. Basically, it's an implementation of my Glider photo booth platform that works specifically for the iPad. And then, of course, the Surface, again, also pretty expensive. It has a lot of the components all built in, right? It's got a camera, a touchscreen, and the computing platform all in one, which kind of, in my opinion, doesn't really leave a lot of room for customization. And since I'm going into this, as a DIY construction, I actually do want to play around with some of the components and kind of make it my own. I don't just want it to be a platform that's already built for me. But the Surface is a great platform, and of course it runs Windows, so you can run any Windows-based photo booth software like Shutterpilot's Capture. You can install that on a Surface and run it, and it works great. So moving on, obviously some of these, these 3 options, they have a touchscreen built in, but since I'm using the Raspberry Pi, I have to go with my own touchscreen. So this is actually a Beatronics touchscreen. In the last video I mentioned that I've used Elo in the past, but I decided to give Beatronics a try. And so far, I'm actually really impressed with the Beatronics touchscreen. It's really light. I think it's a lot lighter than the Elo touchscreens. I'm not sure about that, but it feels pretty light. It came in a box, really easy to pull it out. I haven't actually plugged it in and turned it on, but we'll see that in a future video. But so far, I'm impressed with that piece of hardware. Next up, we have lighting. And obviously, even with any of these options, I don't get lighting for free. So I did choose this ring light. It's actually just the right size for the camera that I'm going to be using to kind of fit right in the middle. So here's the camera I'm going to be using. It'll fit right in the middle there. And it fits perfectly. There's even a little bit of room to move around. So if I mess up on this first build, yeah, I've got a little bit of leeway. So moving on then to cameras, obviously this is the one I'm going to use. This is another one I had lying around, which is in the same family as this one. This one is smaller, cheaper. It doesn't have as much on the audio capabilities, and it's also a lower quality picture. This one's 720p, whereas this one is full HD. So that's one of the reasons that I decided to go with this one. The other reason I went with this one is because it actually has a tripod mount on the bottom, which will make it really easy to use these screws that I got, which are the same size as the tripod mount on you know, the standard tripod screw, whereas this one does not. This one's actually the one that I use to record a lot of my videos for my YouTube channel, for all of my YouTube channels. It's usually plugged into my computer and sits on my monitor really well. It's perfect for that. This one obviously is a webcam and could be used for the same purposes, but it has the added bonus of that tripod mount on the bottom. So that'll work really well for our purposes here. And then, of course, if you wanted to go all out, you could go with a DSLR. This is a Canon, this is an EOS Rebel T7. I don't think this is the latest model anymore, but it's still a current model. Fantastic camera. It's the camera that I bought so that I could work with Capture and build that out and make sure that was updated for the latest cameras. Fantastic camera. It is a DSLR. It's a lot bigger, and there's really no, well, I mean, there are lots of benefits to using a DSLR over a webcam. However, the platform that I'm going to be using, I don't necessarily need the power of like a flash connector or that sort of thing. So eventually I might get into DSLR and use that for a photo booth, but for now we'll stick with the webcam. Webcams are a lot cheaper, lighter, and that seemed like a better option, at least for this first build again. And then, of course, I need to build a case. So I'm going to actually step back here a little bit. So we've got a long piece of wood that I got at Lowe's, I mentioned in the last video, and some of these various wood fasteners. These I mentioned are going to be for the anything that's tripod mounted. So for the light, that's how I'm going to attach the light, and the webcam, they'll be attached using these tripod bolts. And then I've got wood screws of 2 different lengths. So these are the longer ones. These will be used to put most of the frame together. These are shorter ones that'll be used primarily to just hold things together, primarily this piece of plexi right here, to hold that onto the front. And this is an 18 by 24 inch piece of plexiglass. This should be enough to cover everything. I actually had a couple different ideas of how I'm going to cut this up and affix it to the frame that I'm going to build. So stay tuned for the next video where we're going to talk about the dimensions and sizing and kind of finalize some of the plans that I already have. And then, of course, we've got some other cool goodies. These are standoffs. So this is how I'm going to mount the Raspberry Pi to the frame. It'll be just a little bit nicer. And then over here, we've got Gorilla Glue. This is going to help me attach some things, some stain, and then some other things that I already had. We're going to do some power, and this is an HDMI cable, and of course, you know, screwdriver, we'll need that. I've got some other tools lying around here that just aren't on the table. I cleaned the table up to do this video a little bit. And then, of course, we've got my plan for how I'm going to do this. And this, obviously, it looks really tiny, and that's because there are actually a lot of different things that I considered. So up at the top, I decided, you know, what camera was I going to use? What screen was I going to use? And priced out some different options there. And then down here, this was, okay, so how am I going to do the case? This is how I priced everything out. And some links to where I bought them. And some of these things came from Amazon. Some of these things came from Lowe's. And the screen I actually bought directly from the manufacturer. I think I mentioned that in the last video. So with that, that's pretty much everything that's going to go into this build, and different options. Oh yeah, power. Nothing special about that. I could have used any sort of power strip that I wanted to, but this one's nice because it actually has one plug that has some space around it in case I have a you know, a wall wart type AC adapter. And then it's got 2, I think it's just 2. It might have, no, it's just 2 USBs, which will actually be really good because I can use that for power for the Raspberry Pi. And this has a USB connector as well for power. It does come with a wall adapter as well, but since I've got these USB ports here, I might as well just use them. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and click that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you can get notified when the next installments in this series get released. And be sure to share this video with whoever. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.